The Australian Financial Review.
No parent wants to move their kid from school to school. And no kid wants to change schools over and over again. Humans are hardwired to fear change. I went to 3 different primary schools and 2 different high schools. At the time, I hated it. But now I'm older, I realise it helped make me more resilient. I'm better able to cope with change. And chatting to strangers? No problem. That's what happens when you're forced to make friends fast. My next guest, Hannah Drury, thinks moving around as a kid made her more resilient too. It's given this entrepreneur an edge. She's even hired someone, a complete stranger, after striking up a conversation while out for a walk.
Some people think I'm weird and they don't want to have a chat, and that's fine. But you never know who you might sit next to or who you might meet.
They're helping her build her companies, Peppermint Grove and Moss Street Fragrance, which makes candles and diffusers. But in the early days, it was anything but relaxing by a flickering flame with a gorgeous scent. In fact, Hannah would regularly sleep on a blow-up mattress on the floor of her warehouse.
People couldn't believe what I was doing, but it was just the most efficient thing at the time. Don't tell my old landlord that.
Hi, I'm Julianne Sprague, and you're listening to Female Founders, a production from the team at How I Made It. In this series, you'll hear from women who've built their businesses from scratch, how they've persevered against enormous challenges, and their daily hacks to get ahead. Hannah Drury, thanks so much for joining us on the Female Founders podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you and understand the business. Look, confession, like I see lots of different products around and I think, oh, wow, these are amazing. And then I have no idea. How does one go about making a candle? How does one make a fragrance? So I'm keen to have a chat to you about that. But before we get into Peppermint Grove and Moss Street Fragrances, let's talk about Hannah Drury as a kid. What were you like at school?
As a child, I was quite shy. I liked to keep to myself. I loved outdoors, being out in nature. That was really important for me. I spent a lot of time in the garden, smelling things and enjoying nature. I was a really good student. I loved going to school. I loved learning and the pursuit of knowledge, and I don't think that's changed. I moved a lot around as a child. I moved around a lot, I should have said, sorry. My father was in corporate. My mother is a teacher. And so from there I learnt to be comfortable with being uncomfortable pretty quickly because I was moving schools so often.
And so moving different cities or was
it?
Yeah.
So born in Melbourne, then I moved to Brisbane, then Sydney, then New Zealand, then back to Sydney, ended up settling in Sydney for high school. But that really fostered a great sense of resilience in me, which is something that I use a lot in my personal and professional life.
And it was your dad's job that moved the family around?
Yes, absolutely.
So my dad was in the army. So when I went to a number of primary schools and high schools, and so I do say I can find a friend in a crowd because just having to meet a new person is not that uncomfortable.
I will talk to anyone. I actually just met my newest graphic designer. I met on the street last Monday, got chatting. She was needing some freelance work because she's just had a small child, and now we're going to work together on a huge project. And all my staff said, only you could, that could happen. And I love to, some people think I'm weird and they don't want to have a chat, and that's fine, but you never know who you might sit next to or who you might meet, and I love that.
Oh, there we go. A bit of advice up early. It's like just talk to random people on the street. They might become your new graphic designer. So where did you do high school? You're in Sydney at this point, is that right?
Yes, finished high school in Sydney.
Okay. And then do you have, what's your career ambitions at that point?
So finished school and went straight to uni, but I also decided it would be a good idea to do full-time work as well. I really loved working from a young age. I didn't have to go and ask my parents for pocket money. If I wanted something, I was able to get it. And so I did full-time work and full-time uni. And yes, it seemed mad, and it was. And there were sacrifices in my social life. I wasn't able to go out partying as much as my friends. But I really had a strong sense of work ethic. I loved work more than I loved uni, but I knew I needed that theory as well as the practical for my career, which at that time, I knew I wanted to go into marketing, PR, but for a business that I felt really passionate about.
So what's this job that you're working full time?
So I was actually working at a marketing and communications agency. And what I learned from that is unless I was really passionate about the product, it really affected how much I enjoyed it. And so I wanted to be selling a product that I really loved and I felt passionate about and that I connected to.
And you were studying marketing at university?
Yeah, studying. So I did a Bachelor of Business majoring in marketing and communications. And I finished that. And then I actually went and worked for a fragrance business. I already loved fragrance, but I really wanted to work for a business that I felt really passionate about and that maybe I would want to go into someday so that I could learn everything I could and then turn that into my own business eventually.
And so I'm guessing, so you're sort of 21, you're working for a fragrance company, a marketing job. When you decide, you think, actually, I want to go and do my own company, what happens? Do you quit your job or do you still do your job and try and have a side hustle? Like, how do you bridge the gap?
So I worked on the business plan for a good 12 months. Then a month before I was due to launch, I quit my full-time job. I moved back home with my parents and said, this is it. I'm going to throw absolutely everything I can at this. And I started the business from my parents' house in Sydney.
And was that part of the business plan? So you've been working on it, you're going to do, you've worked out the company, what you want to do. You know that you're going to have to throw in the towel of the job that gives you a salary. And so did you talk to your parents about this at the time? So I'm not going to be able to have a salary. I'm just going to need to shift here and not pay you a dime, but thank you.
Absolutely. That's what I did. And I didn't exactly tell them about the pallets of stock that would turn up or anything else. That was probably the hardest part. But I've got to be honest with you, within a few months I was out of there anyway because I needed to get a commercial space. And I found a commercial space in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, which is Bowral. It's about an hour and a half out of Sydney. A lot of people think I'm from there because I now have this business there. And really it was a third of the price per square metre for commercial property. There were government incentives in terms of hiring staff, which I knew I'd eventually need to do. So I very quickly moved the operation out of mum and dad's to this small space. I got a demountable, which I dumped in the space, which was an office come occasional temporary accommodation. Don't tell my old landlord that. And occasionally I'd shout myself, a room at a hostel or a pub, and then I'd drive back home on Friday and stay with mum and dad again. And I did that for a good year before I was actually able to afford a small apartment in Bowral. So I had a comfy bed to sleep on and I moved down there full time.
So just let me get this straight. So you start the business at the parents' house, then your parents' house. You find this facility an hour and a half away, and because it's an hour and a half away, you effectively spend the year living in your warehouse.
Yes.
Like on a blow-up mattress or something?
Yes, that's correct. So I would stay in a hostel and at the pub. I would sometimes drive all the way back to Sydney, but it was just the most efficient thing at the time. And yes, it's nuts. I know it's completely nuts, but you do what you can.
What is everyone else doing at the hostel? Are there other small business owners?
No, absolutely not. And people couldn't believe what I was doing. They thought I was mad. But I was so engrossed in the business that it was really exciting to me that at midnight I was finishing up, I was driving to a hostel or a room at the pub or whatever it was, and I was back up again a few hours later and I was there working again. I was making the candles, I was packing all the orders, I was running all of the accounting system, I was doing all the customer service. It was pure adrenaline. I was really on this high of starting this business. It was great.
You mentioned the business plan. So you spent 12 months building up the plan before you quit the job. But what's in a business plan? What do you write down?
This takes me back to Year 12 business studies, which was my favourite subject at school. And I firstly focused on the 4 Ps. So 1, product, 2, price, 3, place, which is your distribution, and 4, promotion. So I started off with the first one, which was the product and getting that right, because you can't do that until you can't actually work out the price until you have all of your costings and make the product. Then I found the stores that I wanted to be stocked in. That was my distribution. So it was about focusing on a wholesale model and getting it into the right stores. And then I worked out how I was going to promote that. So for me, I went into stores and I offered them the products on consignment. So there was no risk on their behalf to take the brand on. I said, look, here's the brand. If it sells, pay me. If it doesn't, I'll take it back. And I can tell you of the 100 stores I went into, I took back two. That's it. Everybody else, the product sold itself. So that's a very vague overview, but those are the 4 things that you want to focus on: product, price, place, promotion.
Wonderful. So let's talk about the business. So
Yes.
what is it that you wanted to go set up? And when we talk about sort of fragrances and these, you're working for a company, but the companies that produce a lot of these fragrances are massive.
Correct.
Massive companies. Yeah. So what is it that you want to go and set up? And when you decide to do it, as much as you've shifted back to your parents' house, like how do you fund it? Like where does the money come to actually go and try and make, get some stock?
Yeah. Okay. So firstly, I started Peppermint Grove because firstly, I launched with a range of candles and diffusers that were purely focused around the vessel. So we have now quite an iconic vessel, and I wanted to create a product that was not just functional, but aesthetically pleasing as well. I found that the brands of candles and diffusers that were out there were overly branded. They used a really standard vessel that looked a bit, like a Vegemite jar. It didn't actually add to the decor of the home. Just because it's a diffuser doesn't mean it needs to be ugly. The second thing that I wanted it to be able to do was be personalized. So I was actually in Hong Kong the year before, and there was this huge line at the shopping center, and everyone was lining up for something. And I said, what are these people lining up for? And I went to the front of the line just to have a look, and it was when Dior was doing the personalized perfume bottles. And I thought, that's it. Whatever this product is, I've got to be able to bring personalization into the home fragrance space, because no one was doing it. And even now, no one's really doing it, not that I know of, not in a way that is scalable. And I've developed a lid that can be personalised with a message of the customer's choosing, and we now have activations in Maya, Sydney City, and in Melbourne, and in lots of retailers around Australia, as well as an online offering as well.
So walk me through how it goes from an idea to then you're, on the factory floor and you've got product going. What has to happen? What's the steps that happened in between?
First one is designing the product, so finding the supplier who could create the vessel that I wanted to create. So there was a lot of 3D drawings and molds and 3D printing. So firstly, developing the product, choosing the fragrances, and of course finding the suppliers for that. So I did go across to China, and I went and attended one of the big expos and found a glass manufacturer and a packaging manufacturer, and then I used a local perfumery in Australia. I had $50,000 to invest, so it was small runs to start with.
But that's still, for a young woman, that's still a lot of money. Like $50,000 is a lot of money for someone in their early 20s.
I'd worked since I was 14. So while a lot of my friends were out partying at uni, doing a job on a Saturday, I was working full time. So I was on a full-time salary from when I was 18 years old.
And you just saved. You're a saver.
I'm a saver. I'm not a spender. I shouldn't say this, but I hate shopping. I'm not a shopper at all. I have about 5 beauty products. All of my friends look at my cover and go, are you kidding? I really love the financial security of having savings, and in this case it did pay off.
Unless it's candles, then you can buy lots of candles.
Absolutely. Candles, Peppermint Grove, Moss Street, and find them in Maya. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got. But at the end of the day, still, that's for a young person. It's a large amount of money. You've saved it since you were 14. And then you just go and spend it all on this idea.
On stock. It was scary, but I don't think I took the time to really think about it failing. Firstly, I should say that in that 12 months of designing the product, I went and spoke with retail stores that I wanted to stock my product, because I knew from the get-go this was going to be a wholesale brand at the beginning, so only selling to retailers. And I engaged directly with my consumer, who were the retailers, and I asked for their feedback. So my first round of designs are actually completely different to what I ended up with. So I didn't go to print on the first lot of designs, because I spoke to a whole lot of retailers who said, look, I actually think that's a little bit out there. We need something a little more conservative that's going to work with our colour palette in store. So I actually brought my customers along the journey with me. And when I went to launch, they went, well, of course we'll stock the brand, because we've kind of been there with you and you've created this brand for our stores. So I had customers from the get-go.
And how did you get in touch with those retailers to begin with? So say I'm Julianne Sprague and I've got this really great idea for, I don't know, vases. Like, how do I, what am I bringing, the head of Maya? Like, how do I...
So we didn't go that big that soon, but I do love that energy. I actually went into all of the beautiful gift stores. So I just walked in and just spoke to them about my idea and what they thought of it and got the feedback. I think the biggest thing people are afraid of these days is speaking with their customer and wanting to have this perfect idea that they can present early on, when really you want the feedback in the development stages, because that's going to help you along the journey.
And was it just a matter of you just walked in and said, "Hi, I'm Hannah"?
Absolutely. I told you I like to speak to anyone. So I just said, "Hi, I'm Hannah. I'd really love to speak to you about this idea." And people are really receptive. Most people are really lovely. Some people didn't want to speak with me, and that's fine. But it's fine.
Okay.
Got to be okay with rejection.
So let's talk then about how the company's grown. So how long ago were we talking that this happened, where you quit your day job?
8 years ago. So Peppermint Grove just turned 8.
Okay. So what's growth been like over that time period?
Wild, insane. Growing at 30 to 40% a year since inception. I think it will definitely slow down a little bit as we start to head into that mature area. But it's been really, really rapid growth. For me, I had a really strong distribution strategy. So it was all about getting my brand into the right stores, and then the rest would follow suit. I wasn't online to start with. I only went online about 2 years ago when COVID hit, because I had no choice because all of my beautiful stores shut. But I've really focused on growing the brand in terms of product development, constantly bringing out new product offerings, diversification of product. And my latest project, which is really exciting, is that I've just vertically integrated into producing my biggest raw material, which is the actual fragrance. So I now have a perfumery as well, and that provides not only my brands with fragrance, but a lot of other brands in the market as well, which is a really exciting position to be in.
That sounds really exciting, but before we go and find out what a perfumery is exactly, we'll just take a quick short break. So Hannah, we've had a chat about setting up to barrel, sleeping on a blow-up mattress, throwing all of your life savings, your $50,000 of hard-earned to build the business. Let's talk about what's happening now. So it's 8 years in. You've got some fantastic growth. Talk to me about this perfumery that you're getting into and what that does to the business. I'm going to make an assumption here that perhaps maybe it gets more profitable because you can own more of your supply chain. But you tell me why you went and did it and what it's going to do.
Yeah, so I think the long-term goal was always to vertically and horizontally integrate as much as I could. I finally had an opportunity. There was enough funds in the business to be able to vertically integrate into starting this perfumery. And absolutely, there are a couple of reasons for it. Obviously, the financial benefits. The more of the supply chain you own, the more profitable your business, as you get to clip the ticket more along the way. But also there was an opportunity for me to supply the market with fragrance as well. And I'm now supplying a lot of the businesses in Australia, not just home fragrance. There's so many things have fragrance in them. Cleaning products, for example. You can imagine the volume that those sorts of businesses do.
And so what is a perfumery?
It's basically a huge compounding lab that makes the actual fragrance, the actual perfume. So when we have a candle, there's lots of different things that go into it, but the most important ingredient is the fragrance. So it's the perfume without any other alcohol or solvent or anything in it. It's just the perfume on its own.
And so are you making the particular scent?
Correct. It's the actual fragrance that we use as a raw material in our products, and that a whole lot of other businesses use in their product as well. But we've gone a little step further than that. I'm also now making my own proprietary blends of waxes. I'm making all my own wicks. Anything to do with fragrance, I am trying to make myself so that I can vertically integrate my brands, other people's brands, whoever else wants to buy it.
And is this happening in Bowral?
So no, it did actually start in Bowral, and I've just had to take up another warehouse in Preston's, and that's where that's happening, just because we outgrew the building in Bowral.
Sure, but it's sort of made on local shores.
It sure is, yeah.
And so how many perfumeries are there in Australia?
Not many. A lot of the fragrance comes from overseas. So there are a couple, but not many. And I think that was the biggest issue as well, was supply chain issues, especially over COVID. You know, we would be ready to make some candles and we wouldn't have the fragrance. Lead times blew out 60, 90 days. I don't have that problem anymore. So that solved a number of my issues as well.
Was that part of the thinking too? Like we can talk about the bottom line and how it's more profitable, but really to get you moving to own more of that supply chain? Was it like a lot of the headaches in COVID made you realise that?
Absolutely. And my next step is I'm moving to even, I use a beautiful like PETG, which is a fancy plastic bottle for some of my products. I've actually just bought a machine where I can actually make that bottle as well, because same thing, plastic bottles during COVID, nobody could get them because everybody wanted to use them for sanitizer. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'm sick of waiting. This affects my supply chain. I'm now going to make the bottles as well. And I'm trying to look at more and more ways where I can own my supply chain.
So how's the funding gone to date? So you've thrown your 50,000 in.
Yeah, that didn't last long, as you could imagine.
Yeah, I know. You're talking about all of these things the business is doing, and I'm thinking, well, I've just blinked my eyes, and there goes your 50,000.
Yeah, a lot more than 50,000. So I've had two sources of financing. Firstly, I had debtor financing. Debtor financing was great, but it was quite restrictive as it's purely linked to my sales, and really all I could do is buy stock with that. And with a growing businesses eat money. I tell my team this all the time. Everyone thinks, oh, you've got this great business, you must just have all this cash flow. I'm constantly monitoring the cash flow. So then I moved to a capital facility, which has been great. So the bank has lended me X amount of money and I can draw down on that loan as and when I need it. And that's been great because, you know, I can use that for infrastructure. I can use it for staff. There are a whole range of things that I can do with that money. And I can tell you it's drawn down on quite a lot, as you could imagine. It's not sitting there.
Thank you to the bank.
Yes, we love our bank, yes.
Have you yet thought about whether you would take on an external investor? Has those conversations come up? Have you ever been approached for someone to come and buy part of the business?
Absolutely. I've definitely been approached, always open for the right price. It's always an option, and there are always conversations ongoing. I'm okay with giving away a small piece of the pie. You know, that's absolutely fine if it means that my piece gets bigger. I've no issue with that, but it's got to be with the right people who are aligned with my values and how I run the business.
So you feel right now you've got enough going, you can fund the business yourself, you can grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's talk about, we talked about COVID. It sounded like it wasn't an enjoyable time to be having to run your own business. What are some of the other challenges that have been thrown at you? Is there one or two times that you can sort of illustrate how difficult it was and how you got through it?
Absolutely. I think the first one, and there are things, I feel like half the day my job is putting out fires. There are challenges all day, every day. So if you're a business owner out there that just thinks, oh my gosh, when will this end? It doesn't, but you just learn how to handle things better. I used to be such a mess. And now I just take a deep breath and I'm able to get through it. But the biggest one was definitely inventory management. I was using a very manual system. I had someone who was a little bit happy on the ordering. They ordered essentially about 18 months more raw materials than was needed, which, as you can imagine, the effects on my cash flow were disastrous. And at one point I thought, I don't think I'm actually going to make it. Thank goodness I have really good relationships with my suppliers. It all comes back to building relationships with customers, everyone. And I rang them and I just said, look, I'm in a bit of a pickle. Can you help me out with some extended credit terms? And they did that, and they really believed in me and supported me, and we were able to get through it. But it was a very close call.
So this was someone in the business who, by accident, or they were just overambitious, they've made a decision in your business to buy up a lot.
I'm never going to say it's one person. It's always a team effort, and just a little bit ambitious with ordering the stock and not necessarily looking at sales when, but we got through it.
I'm sure you got a good deal on the terms of buying all of that stock.
Yeah, absolutely.
But That's interesting that you talked about your suppliers. So you actually did get a good hearing from them. Do you sometimes look back and think, imagine if you hadn't have had those conversations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't be where I am. But with every single one of my suppliers, I have a really close relationship with them. I go out and see their factories. We go out to dinner. We really have a beautiful sense of trust. And sometimes they've also rang me and said, hey, can you actually pay your invoice 30 days early? I'm in trouble. Yeah, no worries at all. We help each other out because they're businesses too. So it's really beautiful to be in a trusting relationship where you can help each other out at different times. It's really important.
So Peppermint Grove is the first business that you establish, making candles, and then you decide you'll do more street fragrance. How does that come about?
Peppermint Grove is very elegant and feminine. There are a lot of men who also wanted to have home fragrance in their houses. So I wanted to develop a brand that was really unisex, had unisex fragrances, also looked quite unisex in terms of its vessel and its packaging. And then from there, it expanded into a range of ceramics. So ceramics started trending in the homeware space in terms of plates and vases. So I thought, again, let's bring that into the home fragrance space. For me, it's always looking at trends in the home space and in the decor space and seeing how we can bring that into home fragrance. A candle doesn't need to be boring. It can also complement the decor that you've got around the home as well.
But how do you spot a trend? How do you know it's a trend before it's a trend?
That's a really good question. For me, I read a lot of interior design blogs, magazines. I have a lot of influencers that I follow that work in that space. And I also love looking at what Europe and the UK are doing. Generally, they're a little ahead of us over here in Australia, but as well looking at Pantones and colours that are going to be trending for the next season. That's how I source my inspiration.
Have you ever thought there was going to be a big trend and then it didn't happen?
Of course. You can think something's going to pop and think it's a fabulous idea, but the joy of product development is that it takes 9 to 12 months. So you might have missed it by the time it gets, you actually bring the product out, and that's okay. We learn from that. There are ways that we can get rid of stock that might not sell as well. And then other things really surprise us. We bring it out and we go, oh my gosh, that did insanely well. So yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned how from the very beginning you wanted to be a wholesale company and sell to retailers. Did you have a moment where you thought you'd be an Instagram company? Lots of people go out to buy a product and then we just pump it through social and away you go.
Never. When COVID hit, we had no choice but to go online, and I actually built a website overnight. It was terrible looking back at it. We've since, had a professional build one, which is great, thank goodness. But we literally had no choice but to go online, and since then it has been a steep learning curve, but it's been amazing, and I've captivated a whole new audience, which has been great. Not to mention the benefits of obviously getting a retail price for the product versus a wholesale price.
And talk to me about those first few months of COVID. Obviously, there's the former Prime Minister is shutting down borders, shutting down retail. What were you thinking at the time?
I remember wandering around the factory after I'd met with every single employee and said to them, I'm really sorry, but we're just going to have to see what happens. And they were all amazing. They were so supportive, because the reality is I couldn't afford to pay them. Overnight, we literally lost our customers. All of our stores closed. But the other thing is that because I run on accounts, most of my stores who had owed me from Christmas trade, because they're 90 days EOM, they said, sorry, we can't pay you. So all of the money that was due in from Christmas trade in that February, March, they went, sorry, So I met with every single one of my employees, and they all said, look, whatever you have to do, we'll work for free, whatever we need to do. It was a really touching, beautiful moment. And then I was wandering around. I saw that we had ethanol, we had bottles, and I went, let's make some sanitizer. And I remember mixing this sanitizer down in the factory. I put it online, and we did like $70,000 in 2 hours. And I went, oh my God, I think we'll be able to keep the lights on. And then, of course, people started buying candles because they were stuck at home. And so we went from extreme stress to, oh my gosh, how are we going to handle it? And ringing everyone saying, hey, come back, we're actually going to survive this.
Yeah, so in terms of the deep cold winter, it just was like a month or two or just a few months, and then you were back stronger than
we
ever.
were back stronger than ever,
Yeah.
and thank you to our amazing government as well for the support, because that also helped keep the lights on as well, I can assure you.
So let's talk productivity then. It sounds like you work a pretty hectic pace. You sort of, I'm assuming you get up early. I'm just making an assumption.
I get up really early because I'm at different factories on different days, but I also work really late because I have operations in the UK as well. I have
Okay.
I'm
So
working all the time.
Is there one thing that you can highlight? Is there a productivity hack that you've got that...
Absolutely. So I am a lists girl. I have lists with everything because otherwise I can get really distracted being stuck on emails. First thing I do is I get up in the morning, I go to the gym, I come home, I have something to eat, and I set my list for the day, and then I put my day into hourly blocks and what I need to get done in that block. I know it's a little bit old school. I know there are online planning tools, but I really like paper, pen, and coloured highlighters, and that's how I keep myself on track and productive.
So you've got a coloured block and it says I've got 1 hour and I'm going to, I'm trying to think, order the candle stock, which sounds, I don't know.
I'm not doing that anymore, but I could be.
Something. And then, you look at your watch and you've got 10 minutes left of your block. Is it just like, okay, I've got 10 minutes left, that just has to be done and I'm moving on to the next block? Or like how?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, obviously it's not that strict hour. Sometimes I might go 5 or 10 minutes over, but it's at least a guide to keep me on track as opposed to going, I'm going to spend 4 hours on emails when really that's not a priority for me. So if it is a number one priority, of course I will do it until it's done, but I'm not going to get distracted with anything else in that time.
Is there a piece of advice someone might have given you along the way that has really stuck with you and you thought that was actually a really good thing that they told me?
100%. It would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think people are really scared to ask people for advice. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid of looking silly. Ask someone. And the second piece of advice would be, don't forget to engage directly with your consumer. Your friends and family are not your client. Speak to the actual people that are putting their hand in their pocket and buying your product. Those are the people you want to be speaking to.
And if you could go back 8 years and tell yourself something, just one thing, just go, Hannah, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself, love the challenge, love the excitement, and don't forget to enjoy the ride.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed our ride and I think I understand now perfumery, and it does sound, I want to have a bit of a walk around now and see the other side of it. But thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for sharing your platform. I'm really grateful.
Thanks for listening to Female Founders, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And for more insight on entrepreneurs, subscribe to The Financial Review. Go to afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was presented by Julianne Sprague, produced and edited by Lap Fan. Our theme is by Alex Gow, and executive producer is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.